Now peasants come in all shapes and colors, and a lot got arrested in the past, cause the sheriff and his posse be profiling, cause we of the lowest social caste. So all I got to say to you flea-bitten, plague-ridden serfs so blindly acquiescent, when an angry mob is forming, what the fuck wilt thou do? Damn, it feels good to be a peasant.
It is Sunday, October 1st, 2017. This is the Dissident Peasant podcast. I am your host, Jeff, the Dissident Peasant. On today's show, Puerto Rico, our top story. Things are not good there. They haven't been good for a while either. We'll talk about that. Tom Price is out. The Health and Human Services Secretary is gone. Most of the mainstream media is totally wrong about why, falling for a lie so obvious it's embarrassing they're repeating it uncritically. And they should really be ashamed of themselves. Speaking of shame, why it's up to the left to remember history and keep certain events and ideas alive, because we can't count on the corporate media and definitely can't count on rightist propaganda to do it for us. Like I said at the top, guys, I'm your host, Jeff the Dissident Peasant. If you're listening to this, you can hear my voice. I appreciate that. That's awesome. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. We're doing our little radio-free Georgia thing here, and so I really appreciate it. So as near as I can tell, in Puerto Rico, there's been 16 confirmed deaths as of now. It's pretty dire there. Large sections of the country, the power grid has been completely wiped away. Everything is running on generator power. Flooding everywhere. People who have medical problems or need access to medication that requires temperature control obviously are in trouble. I got a guy at work. He's got some family down there. He knows they're alive and he doesn't know much else because communication is pretty tough to get in and out of there. Pretty much all the cell towers are down, so there's not much service on the island to speak of. Want to take a little time travel-y trip. Let's go back to 1920. It's 1920. It's 22 years after the start of the Spanish-American War, and America has procured territory, as empires do. And in 1920, if you're an empire on this planet, you need a navy. You need a navy. That's really the only way that you can manage the commerce and protection of your empire. So the United States felt it needed its own navy, and it passed the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, often called the Jones Act. Not to be confused with the 1917 Jones-Shafroth Act, which also deals with Puerto Rico directly. One section of this law, though, the 1921, requires goods transported by ship from one U.S. destination to another to be carried on U.S. flagged ships that were constructed in the United States, owned by U.S. citizens, and crewed by U.S. legal permanent residents and citizens. So foreign ships who want to deliver stuff to Puerto Rico have to first stop in a U.S. port, unload and reload the goods onto a legally compliant vessel with this act, and then sail for Puerto Rico. Often this means sailing back the exact same direction the ships originally came from. If you know where Puerto Rico is on the map, think of the Caribbean Sea. It's on the northeast tip. So it's not too close to the United States, but it's certainly closer than Cuba or some other islands in the area. And if you're coming from the east, yeah, you're going to pass right by Puerto Rico. You're going to head to some port in Florida or perhaps Savannah, maybe the Carolinas, and you're going to have to turn back around and dump that stuff back in Puerto Rico. The cost of living in Puerto Rico is something like 17% higher than it is in the Virgin Islands, right next door, which is not subject to the Jones Act. This act has been waived temporarily, so that's good as far as it goes. It really has no business being on the books. It should be repealed. It was meant to foster a native shipping industry in this country, and it didn't work. Instead, it's just a law that protects a very small shipping industry in the United States, grants them a monopoly, and allows them to make a bit of scratch. That's all it's good for, and we punish Puerto Rico for it. Other ways we punish Puerto Rico, by the way, in terms of their government, despite the fact that these are American citizens. Puerto Rico receives less Medicaid funding than it would if it were a state of the exact same contribution. Medicare reimbursement rates there are lower than they would be if they were a state. Since at least 2006, the United Nations has been passing resolutions calling on the United States to allow Puerto Ricans to exercise their inalienable right to self-determination. We have yet to get around to that. They cannot vote for president. They are not fully represented in Congress. They are represented by what's called a resident commissioner who has a non-voting seat. They are nonetheless taxed as American citizens. No taxation without representation. It's a catchy slogan. Congress holds what's called plenary jurisdiction over Puerto Rico. This is derived from the Latin word for full, for any non-lawyers in the audience, be they hacks from some Western state or otherwise, in immigration law. Just kidding, man. But this full or plenary jurisdiction over Puerto Rico means that it's absolute, and they can revoke or declare invalid any of the laws of the local Puerto Rican government at any time. There's about 3.5 million people estimated to live there in 2016, so 10K federal workers no longer seems like a lot if you've been following Donald Trump's Twitter feed. Official unemployment was around 12% there before the storm. Likely to be much higher after that. One more thing on this Jones Act. The U.S. Virgin Islands is exempt from this, yes, but Alaska and Hawaii, which also have to import by boat a lot of material, they're also hurt by this act. It's part of the reason why the cost of living is so high in Hawaii. It's really time to let that act go, but this is not a podcast on the Jones Act. This is a podcast about peasantry, and there are a lot of peasants in Puerto Rico right now that are suffering. And I realize that hurricanes aren't necessarily anyone's fault, but certainly seems to me like the mobilization here was quite slow for something that we knew was coming. I heard a general on cable television testing that fact, in his opinion at least, that we hadn't learned a damn thing since Katrina. We were slow then, and we're slow now. It did take a week and a half for that Jones Act to get lifted. It took something like 10 days to get troops on that island, all while the bottom floors of apartment buildings are filling up with sewage. People can't get their insulin. People can't get their medication. Hospitals are turning people away. You know, they say 16 people confirmed dead right now. I think when all is said and done, we're likely to see much higher body counts there. And to the extent that that loss of life was avoidable, that's on our United States government. They're supposed to ostensibly represent us. They don't. One final word on Puerto Rico. I don't have any great insight into this sort of thing, but I will tell you one thing that I learned in school. So I had to take classes on disaster preparedness and recovery, right? And so they teach you different things about engineering principles, where doors need to fail in an open state in case there's an emergency, stuff like that. One thing that always stuck with me in the literature was your disaster preparedness plan needs to focus on your most irreplaceable assets first. And your most irreplaceable assets in an organization are your people. Because there will always be another account to sell to. There will always be another hard drive to buy, another CPU to build, another comm closet to assemble. There are more software to install, more patches to update. There's always going to be that stuff. But there's never going to be another Janison Accounting, right? Or whoever. You can hire somebody to put in that spot, and they might perform reasonably well, but people are not interchangeable cogs, right? They're unique, distinct individuals. I've been working really hard in my political philosophy to marry my respect for the individual person and a more communitarian approach to viewing the way politics works in this country, because I think the atomization of our society holds us back. But I nonetheless still believe that every human being is unique and valuable. And when you prepare for a disaster like this, saving them needs to be the first priority. It appears that that's the stage that we're still in Puerto Rico. So I wish everyone the best. If you have money, maybe throw them a few dollars. I'm sure they could use it. And now a word from the League of Extraordinarily Progressive Southern Gentlemen. Now, as the saying goes, the worker needs bread, but he must have roses too. And so in the spirit of this, I'm gonna do a little poetry reading. Now, before you get your knickers all up in a twist, just want you to know it's just a poem. Okay? It's not an advocation of anything in particular. And also, I'm gonna be doing this poem a bit in my native dialect. I do apologize for my infidelity to the literary tradition. This is entitled When You Meet a Member of the Ku Klux Klan by Robert L. Poston. When you meet a member of the Ku Klux Klan, walk right up and hit him like a natural man. Take no thought of babies he may have at home, sympathies defamed when used upon his dome. Hit him in the mouth and push his face right in, knock him down a flight of stairs and pick him up again. Get your distance from him and then take a running start. Hit him, brother, hit him, and please hit the scoundrel hard. Pour some water on him. Bring him back to life once more. Think of how he did your folks in the days of long ago. Make a prayer to heaven for the strength to do the job. Kick him in the stomach, a low unworthy snob. Call your wife and baby out to see you have some fun. Sick your bulldog on him to see the rascal run. Head him off before he gets 10 paces from your door. Take a bat of sturdy oak and knock him down once more. This time you may leave him where he wallows in the sand, a spent and humble member of the Ku Klux Klan. So I just want to read you some headlines that I saw over the past couple days. Here's ABC News. Tom Price, President Donald Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services, resigned from his post Friday after it was revealed that he had repeatedly chartered private planes for government travel. San Diego Tribune, Tom Price resigns as travel scandal grows in Trump cabinet. NPR, HHS Secretary Tom Price resigns after private plane controversy. New York Times, Health Secretary Tom Price resigns after drawing ire for chartered flights. But here's the LA Times coming at you correct. Bravo, LA Times. Health Secretary Tom Price resigns under fire, but other cabinet members are still taking costly flights. Quite frankly, if you think Tom Price resigning has shit all to do with private charter jets, I got a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. Like, that's the level we're talking here. the Interior Secretary Zinke, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, the EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt, all guilty of this kind of crap. Pruitt has something like a 12-person, 24-hour security detail. What does the EPA Administrator need something like that for? Donald Trump himself is a walking, talking, not at all thinking violation of the Emoluments Clause of the Constitution come to life. He does not care about this. He's been literally squeezing the Secret Service on rent in Trump Tower and golfing every weekend, including this weekend, while he's busy shitting on the mayor of San Juan in Puerto Rico. Grifting is the only part of the job he actually gives a crap about. I'm not sure what the true explanation is, but I can tell you that it's way more likely that Trump is irrational and stupid and feeling pressure on Russia and knows Puerto Rico is not going well and healthcare repeal has failed, and so he lashed out. And Tom Price is gone because he found an excuse to fire him for something. The mainstream media is just desperate to go back to a time where this is all normal again, where our political climate is normal. Like, it's normal for somebody to get busted bilking taxpayers for millions of dollars and then not having a position of public trust anymore. Like, that's a normal thing to happen in a democracy. But Tom Price was crooked when they hired him. Everybody knows it. Are you telling me all those really coincidental and advantageous stock moves all just happened by chance? Give me a break, man. You can't count on these people. You can't count on these people. Not even the New York Times, not even NPR, which are probably the best mainstream news sources that there really are out there anymore. And even they are pitifully bad on this. Tom Price resigning doesn't have anything to do with corruption. How does that make any sense? I'm going to resist the urge to scream about the Emoluments Clause into my mic this weekend, even though I personally think that that's great radio. But I just want to note that, you know, these news organizations, they get millions and millions of dollars. For them to fall for something so transparently untrue just because somebody at the White House told them that it was is pretty indicative of their quality in terms of covering the issues. I just want to point that out and urge you that if you haven't tapped out on hurricane relief that you give to smart independent media these days. At least until Patreon and YouTube own us all. But that's a conversation for another day. Okay, last up today, I want to talk a little bit about history. Without naming any names here, because I've already done it elsewhere. You can go check out The Crystal Paco. Yes, The Crystal Paco. His YouTube channel if you want to hear what I have to say, particularly about a particular individual. But I just want to talk a little bit about why I'm pretty much done with this hashtag resistance crap. Because it seems that some people have decided that it's worth making common cause with Bush-era officials and GOP polls and other political professionals on the right. That it's okay to make common cause with them to defeat Trump because he's such a unique and present danger to the Republic. And that might not sound totally insane to you right off the bat, but it might once I put it this way. Because those people aren't really your allies. They're on the same side of the fence with you right now, and they seem to be aiming their guns mostly in the direction that you want them to. But what they've done is burn their uniforms and switch sides because they are partly responsible for this. Who am I talking about? Who's the they that are responsible for this? Well, I mean, Trump's got a lot of GOP conservative critics on television and print. I mean, some of the more prominent ones that I've seen pop up is Andy Card, who claimed recently that Trump has yet to govern well. Andy Card was the White House chief of staff under President George W. Bush from 2001 to 2006, as well as the head of Bush's White House Iraq group. I really doubt that I need to tell my audience exactly why that's terrible, but the White House Iraq group was a propaganda outfit dedicated to sending the United States government's full force and might to Iraq to fight Saddam Hussein's military for reasons. He also served under George H.W. Bush as Secretary of Transportation. Another prominent GOP Trump critic, David Frum, credited with inventing the expression "axis of evil," which Bush introduced in his 2002 State of the Union address. North Korea, Iraq, and Iran apparently were in an unholy alliance against us at the time. Weird. During Frum's time at the White House, he was described by commentator Ryan Lizza as being part of a speechwriting brain trust that brought intellectual heft. Intellectual heft from Frum, who was a propagandist for a bunch of war criminals and a bunch of granny-starving, plutocratic dickheads. Like, David Frum may be tweeting mean things about Donald Trump right now, but David Frum helped bring Donald Trump to us. Jennifer Rubin. Sober, reasonable conservatives should oppose unpaid-for tax cuts, she recently wrote about Trump. And she was singing a different tune when Romney was running on nonsense, on magical budget thinking. She was also doing hilarious straw grasping the entire 2012 campaign to make a Romney election seem likely for the rubes who read her. And then after the election, called their communications team the worst she's ever seen. Like, she's nothing but a hack. Like, where's this going to end? We going to make common cause with Jeff Flake next because Trump said mean things about him? And just cede Flake's argument that Trump's not a, quote, real conservative? This is conservatism. These people might behave and act as if they're on our side. They are not. They were and are servants, willing or unwilling, witting or unwitting, to the force of brainwashed idiots who've been voting GOP despite them not having a new idea for half a damn century. Okay? Like, George W. Bush accelerated crumbling confidence in our country's institutions because they were unresponsive and poorly managed. His incompetence and cronyism helped establish the GOP's core brand proposition of incompetence and cronyism. And what two words better exemplify Trump's governing philosophy than incompetence and cronyism? And now, you know, that the government not ensuring health insurance for all its citizens and hoovering up every last nickel for the rich and fighting a bunch of unpaid for wars in Central Asia. Now that comes with a side of rude, crude dude, they're just suddenly up in arms. And they didn't sign up for this. But presumably once President Pence takes over, the man who's made a career out of pretending not to notice and learn as little as possible about his coworkers in history, I guess once he takes over, everything will be fine again. Because he knows how to furrow his brow and look concerned and not swear and call protesters sons of bitches. Like, that's where this leads us. they're in the foxhole with you now. They will stab you in the back because they're playing for the other side. They are double agents, witting or unwitting. And so I would urge you to remember on the left recent history, because cable news is full of those people. It's full of ex-Bush era GOP staffers and political operatives who are very critical of Trump. Every one of those chairs belongs to a liberal voice. Hat tip drip glass. That's something that he said, and he's totally right about that. Every one of those chairs belongs to us. Those people shouldn't have any credibility. They brought us to this. And so making common cause with them is a mistake. It's a mistake, and I'm not calling you out for it because I like stirring up internet drama, or I particularly dislike so-and-so personally. That's not what this is. That's not what I do. I'm going to do my best to stay out of that kind of stuff. But you got to be smart about fighting a resistance, because we're on the defensive. Make no doubt about it. Right holds all the cards, which is why it's hilarious that they can't seem to play a winning hand. But I don't know how long we can count on that, right? They hold all the cards. They've got most, if not all, of the levers of power in this country, pretty much top to bottom. So, if we're going to beat them, David Frum's vote ain't going to get us there. That's all I'm saying. Okay, folks, that's what I got for you this week. I was your host, Jeff the Dissident Peasant. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffHisDoNess. That's the best way to get in contact with me. If you want to tell me what you think, got ideas for topics, ideas for interview guests. Got a few guys in the pipes right now working on. Really excited to talk to some people who are much more smart and knowledgeable about the world than I am. DissidentPeasant.com is still headquarters. Stay distant, serfs.
Our rewards are not in heaven.
Money tough and union made.
We can fight but strong together.
Money tough and union made.
Divided we fall, united we stand.
Money tough and union made.
It's a working woman and a working man.
Money tough and union made.
We're not waiting for judgment day.